In the austere halls of Congress, an innocuous inquiry from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett unexpectedly ignited a nationwide inferno, thrusting Elon Musk's affairs into the relentless glare of live television. The ensuing maelstrom defied all predictions. The initial question, far from an accusation, was a meticulously phrased, unadorned query from Congresswoman Crockett during a House subcommittee session focused on federal technology contracts. Could someone please clarify why SpaceX has received over $2.8 billion in no-bid contracts this fiscal year alone? She asked, her voice calm and devoid of rancor. Yet an almost palpable tension permeated the room. The camera briefly fixated on the witness table, where executives from 3 prominent tech firms sat. None offered a direct response. Among them, a former SpaceX counsel, now a federal advisor, appeared visibly unnerved. After the session, as Jasmine traversed the Rayburn building, flanked by her aides, her thoughts didn't linger on question. Such inquiries were part of her routine. But this time, an unsettling difference lingered. As she removed her heels, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. The message sent a shiver down her spine. Careful who you try to humiliate in public, especially if you plan on keeping your job. Initially, she dismissed it as merely another troll. Her inbox perpetually overflowed with venom. As a black woman in Congress, constant abuse was an unfortunate reality. Yet, this message possessed an unnerving precision. Another text arrived from the same anonymous sender. You're playing a game where you don't understand the rules. There are ways to silence noise. Jasmine froze, her gaze fixed on the screen. She handed the phone to her chief of staff, Lillian Baxter, who, after reading the messages, immediately secured the office door. "He's watching," Lillian whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's Elon." Jasmine attempted to refute it. No, it could be anyone. But even to herself, her words lacked conviction. Still, she clung to a fragile hope. Within hours, an encrypted email landed in her inbox, devoid of salutation or signature. It contained a single, chilling sentence. "We suggest you redirect your curiosity towards smaller, less expensive targets." Attached was a heavily redacted financial document. A loan her father had secured 15 years prior, one she had never seen. Sleep eluded her that night. She sat on the edge of her bed in her D.C. condo, listening to the city's nocturnal pulse. It wasn't fear that consumed her, but a cold, calculated assessment. Jasmine had weathered countless storms, clashed with lobbyists, fought even harder with colleagues. But this felt distinct, surgical, profoundly personal. She called her brother, Renard, a civil rights attorney in Minneapolis. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Run, you busy?" "Always." "What's up? What would you do if someone sent you your dad's financial history out of nowhere?" A pause. "Are you talking about something real or a hypothetical?" "Real. Possibly Musk." Jasmine slowly exhaled. "Girl, you've been poking bears." "Yeah, but this isn't just a poke. He wants me quiet." Renard didn't laugh, didn't dismiss her as paranoid. Instead, he imparted a truth she would forever remember. If someone with real power feels threatened by your voice, it means your voice is working. But if you stay quiet now, it won't be your last silence. She hung up and stared at her living room wall for a long time. On that wall hung a framed poster, a photograph of Barbara Jordan behind a podium in 1974, her eyes fixed on an unseen future. Jasmine rose, grabbed a notepad, and began scribbling names. Lobbyists, subcontractors, Senate aides, tech watchdogs. If she was going to speak, she needed more than righteous indignation. She needed incontrovertible facts, irrefutable paper trails. But as she began to delve deeper, another message arrived the next morning from the unknown number. "Last warning." That was the precise moment she made her decision. She wouldn't just speak. She would expose to the entire nation the true face of silence when given a microphone. The real bombshell, however, remained undetonated until she entered the hearing room. Armed with a USB stick and a plan she had revealed to no one, not even her trusted staff. Jasmine Crockett was not reckless. She never made impulsive moves on Capitol Hill, where every utterance was meticulously dissected, twisted, and weaponized. But that morning, 3 days after the final ominous message, her patience had reached its limit. Lillian knocked once, entered her office, and closed the door. "You've barely said a word since Friday. I don't know what you're planning, but whatever it is, I need to know. Are we in danger?" Jasmine didn't immediately reply. Instead, she opened her desk drawer and retrieved a small thumb drive. "Everything's on here," she said quietly. "The messages, the email, the loan document, even the metadata. I had someone scrub it. It's real. It all points back to one person." Lillian recoiled, her voice hushed and urgent. "You're talking about Elon Musk, Jazz. Do you realize what happens if you're wrong?" "I'm not," Jasmine countered. "And even if I was, let them try and prove it." The next hour was arduous. Lillian pleaded with her to wait, to grant her a few more days. "Let me loop in people we trust," she urged. "Someone from the Senate, or even Ro Khanna. Don't go in alone. That man has rockets and satellites and data centers. He's not playing checkers." But Jasmine had already grasped a deeper truth. If I wait, this dies in committee, buried behind pending investigations and future hearings. In 6 months, the story turns into whether I violated some ethics code. I know this game. She turned towards the window, gazing out at Independence Avenue, where reporters lingered with their cameras. They think they can scare me into silence with veiled threats and ancient debts. But my father's loan didn't define him, and it doesn't define me. Renard called again. He had unearthed more. Musk has shell companies bidding through proxies. Some of them got classified AI contracts approved last year without any oversight. I've got receipts if you need them. Send everything, and Jazz, be ready. He won't just come at you on the record. He'll come sideways, background leaks, stories about your past, old clients, maybe even your family. She exhaled. I'm already getting them. There's a guy from the Daily Ledger calling people I went to college with. You sure you still want to go forward? Yeah, I'm done flinching. By the time Monday arrived, Jasmine had made her choice. The hearing was on AI accountability and defense appropriations. Elon Musk was not officially slated to attend, but Jasmine knew his influence would permeate the testimony, the background papers, and the tech lobbyists in the back rows. She arrived early, her hair pulled back, wearing a navy suit, her face calm but resolute. She carried nothing but a binder and that singular USB stick tucked securely into a pen case inside her folder. Even her staff remained unaware of its existence. Inside the committee room, the atmosphere was taut. Lobbyists whispered, journalists watched from the back, every seat occupied. Representative Karen Laskin from Oregon was already speaking when Jasmine took her seat at the dais. Laskin's voice was steady, her words vague, addressing the potential risks of unregulated AI development, the kind of speech that sounded important but conveyed nothing. Jasmine wasn't there to sound important. When her turn came, she dispensed with pleasantries. No smile, no warm-up. "I want to read something to the committee," she began, her voice even. "It's a message I received after our last session. Direct, short, and very intentional." She paused, then read, "Careful who you try to humiliate in public, especially if you plan on keeping your job." People shifted uneasily in their seats. I received 2 others, along with financial information about my father, who has no public role in government. Chairman Price attempted to interject, but Jasmine raised her hand. "I have the full trail, metadata, origin IPs, timestamps. I've already secured backup verification. But today isn't about proving it to you. It's about letting the public know that intimidation doesn't belong in these walls." She stopped calm, composed, but the silence that followed felt razor sharp. "I'll be submitting a USB drive into the record. It includes everything." Then she sat back. She hadn't uttered his name. Not yet, but she didn't need to. Jasmine knew the real storm would erupt after lunch, when she would finally speak his name aloud, and the footage would saturate every screen in the country. There was no reprieve, no moment to breathe. As soon as Jasmine submitted the USB drive, everything transformed. The chairman attempted to divert attention, calling on Representative Bain from Utah to steer the discussion, but it was too late. Reporters had caught the scent. Camera zoomed in. A producer from C-SPAN was seen leaning into her earpiece. Something significant was unfolding, and everyone sensed it. Jasmine sat motionless, idly flipping through her notes, but she wasn't reading. Her hands were warm, not trembling, but pulsing with the potent energy that accompanies being at the epicenter of a tempest. "You lit yourself up." Lillian, sitting behind her, didn't say a word. She simply slid a legal pad across the table. Scrawled on it were the words, "Musk's reps are here. Back row, black tie, third from the left." Jasmine glanced up. She recognized him. Dorian Vest, one of Musk's private legal consultants. She had seen him 2 years prior in a Silicon Valley oversight meeting, defending a Neuralink patent issue. Cold eyes, never blinking. He wasn't there to observe. He was there to collect. Chairman Price called for a recess. 10 minutes, he announced, pointedly avoiding Jasmine's gaze as he tapped his gavel. The room instantly transformed. Staffers spoke into phones. Aides whispered behind binders. Jasmine remained seated. Representative Elena Morales slid beside her, her voice low. "You sure you want to go all the way with this? I mean, that was bold what you did. But if you're wrong, I'm not. I know. Just remember what happened to Ingrid Hale." The name resonated. Hale had been a senator who had challenged tech funding in 2018, only to resign after a so-called scandal involving a nonprofit she had never even managed. The story had vanished a week later, but the damage endured. "I remember," Jasmine said. Back in her office during the recess, she checked her phone. The first headline had already flashed. "Breaking. Representative Jasmine Crockett alleges threats over SpaceX contracts." She scrolled through thousands of comments, some supportive, others accusing her of a publicity stunt. Then she saw it. Musk's tweet. Just one line. "You'd think a congresswoman would have better things to do than pretend she's being bullied." The bait was set. She looked at Lillian. "He's playing the crazy black woman card." "Yeah, and he's hoping people eat up." Jasmine wasn't surprised. This was strategy, not spontaneity. Elon knew precisely what tone to strike. Dismissive, sarcastic, condescending. The goal wasn't merely to discredit, it was to make people ridicule her. Back in the hearing room, the atmosphere had sharpened. Chairman Price opened his mouth, but Jasmine interrupted. "I'd like to make one more point, Mr. Chairman." He hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "Proceed." Jasmine turned to the witnesses. "Before we continue, I have one question. Have any of your companies, SpaceX, Neuralink, Tesla, been awarded AI development contracts through shell corporations or unlisted intermediaries?" That did it. A murmur instantly rippled through the room. One witness glanced toward the back row. Another fumbled with his mic. "I'll repeat. Have you, any of you, ever used fronts to obtain defense or infrastructure contracts that weren't openly disclosed to this committee?" The Tesla representative cleared his throat. "Congresswoman, I don't think it's appropriate to." It's a yes or no question. No one answered. She continued, "Because I have documentation that shows AI testing was conducted in partnership with the Department of Defense at a site in El Paso, using a subcontractor with a shell registration linked to a known Musk affiliate." Now panic set in. Eyes darted. Phones appeared. And then Jasmine spoke the words. "I believe Elon Musk has directly threatened a sitting member of Congress to avoid questions about these contracts. And if we let that slide, we're setting the kind of precedent that no democracy survives." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Everyone heard her. But the moment that would turn the country on its head hadn't arrived yet. That would come in the next 5 minutes, when she projected the first message onto a screen for the entire nation to see. 5 minutes later, everything Jasmine had kept guarded was now laid bare. She stood, walked to the committee's projection screen, and inserted the USB stick herself. "Congresswoman Crockett," Chairman Price said, his tone clipped, "I must remind you that all digital evidence must go through the committee clerk prior to—" She cut him off. "I understand, Mr. Chairman, but given that this evidence includes communication sent directly to me, threatening my position and my safety, and given that some members of this body have shown reluctance to address how tech money influences government oversight, I'm choosing to exercise my time to show the American people what intimidation looks like." Click. The first message appeared, silently projected onto the giant screen behind the witness table. Careful who you try to humiliate in public, especially if you plan on keeping your job. No one uttered a sound. Then the second. You're playing a game where you don't understand the rules. There are ways to silence noise. And finally, we suggest you redirect your curiosity towards smaller, less expensive targets. The font was unremarkable, the words devoid of theatricality, yet they landed like physical blows. People in the gallery shifted. One reporter raised his phone and began live streaming. The Tesla executive kept his eyes fixed on the wood grain of the witness table. Chairman Price looked poised to object again, but Jasmine had one more move. I've brought verification of the source. A third-party firm traced the origin server. The IP points to a routing center owned by a Musk-affiliated tech incubator in Fort Worth, Texas. There's no denying the connection anymore. Then she turned to the camera, not the committee. They're the line we don't talk about in politics, the one between lobbying and coercion, the one between influence and threats. Today, I'm not here to speculate. I'm here because that line was crossed, and I believe the American people deserve to know who's willing to use power not to build, but to silence. Whispers escalated into open conversation. A few aides began to leave the room. One Musk staffer quietly removed his badge and slipped out a side exit. The committee room was descending into disarray, but Jasmine didn't waver. Representative Morales leaned in toward Chairman Price. We need a recess now. Price nodded, calling for a 30-minute break. Jasmine stepped down and walked back to her seat. Lillian handed her a bottle of water, but said nothing. She didn't have to. Outside the chamber, news anchors were already reporting. Crockett goes public with Musk messages, tech billionaire accused of threatening Congresswoman Elon Musk, political power or dangerous influence? But inside the building, things were shifting faster than the press could comprehend. Representative Jared Knopf, who had maintained a steadfast silence on tech oversight for years, crossed the room and sat beside Jasmine. Look, he said quietly, I'm not saying I believe or don't believe everything, but if you're right, this could change everything. You need to watch your back. I already am, she said. Then, almost inadvertently, he added, there's more you haven't seen. He's got friends and agencies, not just influence contracts. People owe him. Jasmine looked at him. Then they're part of this too. Knopf hesitated. If you're going to fight this, you're going to need allies. She raised an eyebrow. You offering? He looked down. I didn't say that. Outside the hearing room, Capitol Police were already bracing for media pandemonium. An officer tapped Lillian on the shoulder. We're going to need to escort you out a separate way, just in case. Jasmine wasn't scared, but she was acutely aware now, awake in a way she hadn't been in years. She had struck something real. But even Jasmine didn't anticipate what came next. The online backlash, which morphed from Musk's denial into an all-out smear campaign targeting everything from her finances to her family. By nightfall, the internet was ablaze. Clips of Jasmine reading the threats had gone viral, endlessly replayed by every major outlet. CNN analysts debated her strategy. Fox News labeled it a manufactured distraction. Twitter, now X, was divided. Some users hailed her as a national hero, while others accused her of a publicity stunt to elevate her profile. The smear campaign began almost instantly. A thread appeared under a verified account known for breaking tech gossip. It alleged that Jasmine had ties to a former campaign donor who had once done business with a Chinese telecom firm. The screenshots were vague, the language meticulously crafted, but the implication was stark. Discredit her by any means necessary. Another account posted a decade-old clip of Jasmine at a law school protest, shouting through a bullhorn. The caption read, "Is this who we trust with national security?" And then came the bots, hundreds of newly created accounts, all posting the identical line. Crockett's playing the victim again. Jasmine watched from her apartment, shoes off, hair down, phone in her lap like a loaded weapon. She wasn't surprised, but it still stung. Renard called again. They're digging for anything they can twist. They want to make you emotional, get you to overreact. I'm not biting. Good. Because what you did today, that was real, and real scares them. She smiled just slightly. I needed to hear that. Outside her window, DC buzzed with camera crews and vans. Reporters were camped in front of her building, shouting questions at anyone who entered or left. Lillian had gone home to change, but promised to return by sunrise. Then Jasmine's phone vibrated again, this time a text from her cousin in Baton Rouge. "Hey, you okay? Some guy came by Mama's shop asking questions about you. Said he was with a magazine, but didn't have a card. Just thought you should know." Jasmine's stomach churned. It had begun. She opened her laptop and pulled up her father's loan file, the one Musk's people had used as leverage, a $45,000 line of credit taken out in 2007 to save their family store from closing. Her dad had paid it off in full before he passed. But someone wanted to exhume it now, frame it as a scandal. That was their modus operandi: quiet dirt, public shaming. She took a breath and logged into a secure drive. Inside were dozens of files, financial links between Musk's entities and shell corporations with government contracts. She had spent the past 2 weeks cross-referencing them, late at night, eating cold noodles while scrutinizing spreadsheets. This wasn't just about her anymore. It never was. It was about the unchecked power of one man, about how money could seal mouths and open doors, and how easily that power could morph into fear. The next morning, she appeared on Face the Nation. No makeup artist, no prepared talking points. Just her and a microphone. Host Kevin Sloan leaned in. "Congresswoman Crockett, are you accusing Elon Musk of trying to silence you?" She stared directly into the camera. "I'm not accusing. I'm saying it happened." He paused. "Are you afraid?" "No. I am tired. Tired of seeing people with enough money to bypass accountability. Tired of the idea that questioning someone rich makes you a target, and tired of being told to stay quiet because the truth might be inconvenient." Sloan blinked. The room felt still. She added, "We don't work for billionaires. We work for the people who can't by silence." The clip trended for hours. Support poured in: teachers, veterans, nurses, people who had never heard her name until that week. Some sent flowers to her office. Others left voicemails, crying. One woman wrote, "I've been scared to speak in my own job. You made me feel brave again." But for every message of support, there were 5 more attempting to dismantle her. Yet, Jasmine's strength wasn't the full narrative yet. What came next made it impossible for even her harshest critics to look away. Musk's sudden, ruthless retaliation. The response arrived not with fanfare, no public statement, no press conference, just a tweet, short, blunt, fabricated drama. Sad. It dropped at 6:04 a.m. West Coast time and instantly seized the news cycle. Most analysts had anticipated Musk would remain silent or dispatch lawyers after Jasmine. But that tweet was the starting pistol. What followed was not a rebuttal. It was a scorched earth campaign. Hours later, a well-known digital magazine published a sudden exposé titled, "Who is Jasmine Crockett? Really?" The story dredged up old landlord disputes from her early 30s, hinted at exaggerated net worth claims from her first congressional run, and quoted anonymous sources calling her temperamental and attention-hungry. One quote, attributed to a supposed former staffer, read, "She always thought she was the smartest in the room. Maybe she should have picked a quieter room." Jasmine read it twice. Then came the second wave, a podcast hosted by a crypto investor whom Musk frequently retweeted. The host cackled for 20 straight seconds before declaring, "Imagine thinking you can pick a fight with the guy who literally controls your internet connection." He wasn't wrong. SpaceX's Starlink held contracts with over 20 U.S. states and was in talks for AI infrastructure on military bases. Musk wasn't merely wealthy. He was embedded at levels that seemed to render him immune to traditional consequences. Renard called again, this time with greater urgency. "There's chatter online. Musk's people are hinting at an ethics investigation into you. You need to prepare." Jasmine remained calm. "On what grounds?" "They're building something around misuse of committee resources. Total nonsense. But if it sticks..." She already understood. The strategy wasn't to prove her wrong. It was to drown her out, shift the conversation, dismantle her credibility brick by brick. Later that day, her alma mater received a formal inquiry from a private watchdog group, clearly linked to Musk's orbit. The topic, whether she had misrepresented academic achievements in prior media interviews. It was laughable, yet dangerous. That night, Jasmine sat on her living room floor, papers spread around her like a war room. Lillian walked in with Thai takeout and 2 beers. "You eating?" Jasmine shook her head. "I can't figure out where the next hit's coming from. I feel like I'm walking around a room full of lasers, and I can't even see the beams." Lillian sat beside her. "You already said the truth. They're just trying to make it loud enough that no one hears it." Jasmine stared down at a spreadsheet. "You think they'll come after my family? They already have." That stopped her. Lillian handed her a printout. Screenshots from a now-deleted Reddit thread. Pictures of Jasmine's cousin's auto shop. Comments linking her uncle's small business to suspicious campaign donations. It was spiraling, and she was at its epicenter. The next morning, during her daily security briefing, Capitol Police suggested she avoid public appearances for the week. A man had been arrested outside her office the night before, armed, claiming he was there to ask some questions about lying women in Congress. She nodded slowly. "Did he say my name?" "No, but he had your picture in his car." She thanked them, returned to her desk, and sat in silence. Her phone buzzed again, this time not a message, but a link. An internal memo leaked to the press showed that Musk-affiliated contractors had been awarded nearly $400 million in DoD funding through backdoor amendments. The leak came from a burner account, nameless, but the documents matched her findings exactly. Jasmine leaned back in her chair. Someone on the inside had just blinked, but she didn't yet know who had sent that leak or how perilous it was for both of them. That answer would soon arrive, irrevocably altering the battle. By the end of the week, the Capitol felt as if it had shifted on its axis. For months, quiet murmurs about tech giants and their pervasive reach into government policy had circulated. But what Jasmine had done transformed those whispers into full-throated arguments. The leak changed everything. It was no longer just screenshots. It was hard evidence, dollar amounts, contract codes, company names linked directly to Elon Musk's labyrinthine web of influence. And still, few were willing to utter his name. Behind closed doors, staffers whispered about retaliation. One aide from the Armed Services Committee told Lillian, "We've had calls from donors we haven't heard from in years, asking where we stand." It's getting weird. Jasmine wasn't shocked. Power doesn't panic unless it's genuinely threatened. Then came the first internal memo from House leadership, urging members to remain neutral until further review. That was code for, "Don't touch this unless you absolutely have to." But silence was also a stance. She began losing support in small, subtle ways. Colleagues who once greeted her in the hallway now averted their gaze. Invitations to panels and press briefings were indefinitely postponed. Her committee staff dwindled by the day. No one was fired. People simply started taking leave, reassigning themselves, citing burnout. Even a morning coffee cart outside her office vanished. "You notice they're treating you like the virus instead of the warning?" Lillian said one afternoon, handing Jasmine a folder. "I noticed," Jasmine replied, "but they're not scared of me. They're scared of what this means." Still, one person had not distanced himself. Representative Giles Dalton, a centrist from Arizona who typically kept a low profile. That morning, he appeared at her door unannounced. "Can we talk?" She nodded. They sat in her office, blinds drawn. "I've got a friend in the Inspector General's office," he said. "He told me there's a freeze on all AI-related contract audits. Not a delay, a freeze." Someone pulled strings. Jasmine leaned forward. "Must possibly, but goes higher. This stuff gets routed through joint special projects now. That's above your average bureaucrat." "Are you saying this is national security?" "I'm saying it's convenient how every attempt to audit his contracts suddenly goes dark. And now you've brought daylight." She tilted her head. "Why tell me this?" He looked down at his hands. "Because I watched that hearing 3 times, and I couldn't stop thinking, if it were me, would I have the spine to do what you did?" Jasmine didn't answer. He stood, his hand on the door. "Just be careful. This isn't just tech money anymore. This is institutional." That word resonated. Institutional. Not corporate, not personal. The threat wasn't a man. It was the vast, entrenched machine that allowed that man to flourish unchecked. The next day, during a private subcommittee meeting, Jasmine presented more evidence, redacted, sourced, verified. A few members nodded. One even whispered, "Thank you." But no one said it on the record. That night, her phone rang with a blocked number. She picked up. A shaky, low male voice. "I'm the one who sent you the leak. I can't talk long." She froze. "Who are you?" "I used to work on the integration team for one of the defense contracts." "What you said in that hearing, that wasn't wrong. It's worse than you think." "Worse how?" "Some of the projects aren't even operational. They're fake." Musk just moved numbers around on paper and pulled funding from other divisions to make it look like something was built. "You have proof." "I have access. But they're monitoring my logins now. I'll try again next week." He hung up. No name, no trace. But the fear in his voice was undeniable. Jasmine sat in the dark, phone still in her hand. The system was cracking, slowly, painfully, but it was happening. But what she didn't expect, what she couldn't have prepared for, was how far the other side would go to break her next. Not through politics, but through the people she loved. It happened on a Thursday morning, just before sunrise. Jasmine was in her kitchen, pouring coffee, when her personal cell phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but it had a Louisiana area code. She answered, expecting a constituent or a distant relative. "Miss Crockett," a voice said. "Yes, this is Officer Delaney with the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office. We have your cousin Donna in protective custody. Someone broke into her apartment last night. Nothing stolen, just a mess, and a photograph of you was left on the kitchen table." Jasmine didn't speak. Her body stiffened, the mug still in her hand. "Is she okay?" she finally asked. "She wasn't home, thank God, but she's shaken. We've moved her somewhere safe." After she hung up, she stood for a full minute, staring at the coffee dripping from the edge of the counter. When Lillian arrived an hour later, Jasmine barely looked up. "They're not just warning me anymore. They're putting hands on people." Lillian sat down slowly. "We need to tell someone. I've already contacted local authorities, but I know how this works. There will be no fingerprints, no camera footage, just shadows." Lillian was silent for a while. Then she asked the question neither of them wanted to utter aloud. "Do we stop?" Jasmine looked her in the eye. "If we do, what was the point of all this?" Still, the burden was growing heavier to bear. That afternoon, Renard flew in from Minneapolis. He didn't call ahead. He simply appeared at her door with a carry-on bag and a worn-out hoodie. "You look like hell," he said. "You flew in to insult me." "I flew in because someone just tried to scare my cousin to death." They sat in silence for a moment before Jasmine whispered, "I didn't think it would go this far." Renard leaned back. "That's the thing about power. Once you threaten it, it'll show you exactly how ugly it can get." She nodded. For the first time since this ordeal began, she cried. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quiet tears while staring at the wall. Not because she was scared, she realized, but because she hated what her courage was costing the people she loved. Renard placed a hand on her shoulder. "You still got fight in you." She didn't answer right away. Then she wiped her face, stood up, and grabbed her laptop. "Yes, but now it's not just about Musk. It's about the machine that lets him act like this." Later that night, she went live on Instagram. No makeup, no special lighting, just her sitting on her couch. She didn't yell, didn't accuse. She simply spoke. "I want to talk to the people who've been following this story, because what's happening isn't a headline. It's real life. Someone tried to send a message by going after my family, and I want to be clear, I got the message. But I'm not backing down. Not now, not ever." Within minutes, her live stream was picked up by blogs, then cable news. Her face filled television screens across the country, not as a politician, but as a person, a woman standing her ground under fire. Comments poured in, "We're with you, protect her, don't let this story die." And just as suddenly, the tone of the national conversation began to shift. Journalists who had remained neutral started asking tougher questions. Former Musk employees began contacting independent reporters. And on Sunday night, a second whistleblower came forward on a local California news station, confirming that SpaceX had used falsified performance data to secure military AI funding. Jasmine watched the clip in silence. Renard was on the other end of the couch, arms crossed. "They're cracking." "Yeah," she whispered, "but they're not finished." But in the chaos of the leaks and confessions, something bigger was taking shape, something that could finally turn the tide for good: accountability. And Jasmine knew she had one last card to play. 3 days after the second whistleblower came forward, everything changed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was undeniable. An internal memo leaked from the Department of Defense, signed by a deputy undersecretary, confirmed that several AI contracts awarded to companies connected to Elon Musk were under ethics-based suspension. In plain English, it meant someone at the top had finally relented. For the first time since this ordeal began, Jasmine wasn't the only one holding the microphone. Other voices were finally speaking. Former staffers, mid-level engineers, even a former Air Force liaison stepped forward, confirming what Jasmine had been saying for weeks. Performance data had been altered to secure AI defense funding, with government watchdogs quietly pressured to look the other way. CNN ran a special report called Silicon Shield, inside the Musk government loop. They used red yarn graphics and shadowy interview footage. It wasn't perfect, but it helped. The public narrative shifted. One op-ed in the Los Angeles Sentinel put it plainly: "We don't know if Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett took on Goliath, but Goliath sure seems nervous." In the halls of Congress, people who had once avoided her were suddenly eager for meetings. Representative Giles Dalton returned, this time with a formal proposal: a bipartisan hearing on ethical contracting in tech and AI, which Jasmine would co-lead. At first, she hesitated. "Why now?" she asked him, blunt as ever. Dalton shrugged. "Because you're right, and because people are finally watching." The announcement went out that afternoon. A new hearing was scheduled, and Jasmine would have the floor. The topic: government contract integrity and tech influence in defense procurement. The pressure was immense, not just because the nation was watching, but because Musk wasn't done. His allies had been quiet lately, but Jasmine didn't for a second believe that meant surrender. It meant recalibration. And sure enough, that same night, another anonymous story dropped, this time accusing Jasmine of accepting foreign consulting perks during a trade mission 4 years earlier. The article was vague, based on unnamed sources, and immediately debunked by the State Department. Still, it was a stark reminder: the fight wasn't over. But something was different now. Jasmine was no longer standing alone. A group of veteran lawmakers, some of whom she had once considered silently complicit, released a joint statement backing her call for reform. Advocacy groups followed, then watchdog organizations. Then the Department of Justice announced a preliminary review into the contracting process tied to Neuralink's recent AI defense grant. The dam had broken. Renard was back in Minneapolis by then, but they talked every night. One evening, she told him, "It's not about Musk anymore. It's about the ecosystem that made him think threatening me was just a move on a chessboard. And now he knows I'm not a pawn." A week before the hearing, a retired general requested a private meeting. His name was Wilfred Stone. Jasmine recognized him. He had served on the Defense Innovation Board. She agreed. They met in a quiet room off the Capitol Rotunda. No cameras, no aides. Stone was gruff, deliberate. "I've watched you from a distance," he said. "Wanted to see how far they'd push you before you snap. I'm still here." He nodded. "Good. Because what you're touching, it's deeper than most folks realize. The tech companies don't just sell us tools. They build the very systems we rely on to fight, to defend, to communicate. And when one man has his name on too many of those systems, the country becomes vulnerable." Jasmine let the words settle. Stone leaned in slightly. "You've stirred a hornet's nest. But sometimes that's the only way to find out who's been hiding behind the silence." He stood, saluted lightly, and left. That night, Jasmine looked over her final notes. Her team was prepping exhibits, verifying numbers, organizing testimony. Lillian handed her a packet. "Everything's lined up. You ready?" Jasmine nodded. "I've been ready since the day they told me to be quiet." But the true weight wasn't in the paperwork. It was in her voice. Because at that hearing, she would speak not just as a lawmaker, but as a woman who had faced the storm and never yielded. The hearing room felt colder than usual. Perhaps it was the temperature, perhaps the sheer weight of what was about to unfold. This was not the typical bustle of business as usual. No hollow greetings, no polite smirks. Reporters filled every inch of the press gallery. The American public was watching, waiting, and Jasmine knew this wasn't just about contracts anymore. This was about whether the truth could still stand tall in a room brimming with power. She walked in without ceremony, holding a worn black folder in one hand, her other resting briefly on the shoulder of Lillian, who had been her unyielding support from day one. At the center of the committee table sat the placarded Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, co-chair. She took her seat. The chairman called the session to order. Cameras clicked, microphones hissed. A livestream ticker ran across the bottom of the screen. Jasmine waited for the opening remarks to conclude. Then she leaned forward, turned on her mic, and looked directly into the camera. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries," she began. "We're here today to ask a simple question. Who's really making decisions about how our country operates? Is it elected officials accountable to the people, or billionaires with the power to intimidate, manipulate, and purchase silence?" She held up a folder and opened it. In these pages are contract amendments signed off without review, shell companies created 2 weeks before receiving government funding, and internal emails showing how Musk-affiliated teams manipulated AI capability reports to secure military money. Gasps, murmurs. She didn't flinch. "I bring this forward not because I hate success or ambition or innovation. I bring it forward because no one, no matter how wealthy, how admired, or how powerful, should be above the rules we ask others to follow." She paused. "I was told to stay quiet, that speaking up could cost me everything. I lost friends. I put my family at risk. But I'm still here." Lillian was off to the side, eyes locked on her. Renard, watching from home, texted one word, "Fire." Jasmine continued, "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for integrity. For every whistleblower who came forward risking their job. For every taxpayer funding ghost projects. For every person who's ever been told to shrink so someone else could stand taller." She took a deep breath. "I submit this evidence for the official record." The folder landed with a soft thump. There was a long silence, then applause, not from the committee, but from the gallery. Real people, some staffers, some guests, a few journalists. Nothing wild, just a slow, steady clap that built into something undeniably honest. The chairman banged his gavel. "Order!" But he couldn't halt the momentum. 2 other lawmakers, one Democrat, one Republican, issued statements during the session supporting an independent investigation. The Department of Defense released a bulletin acknowledging potential procurement irregularities tied to SpaceX and Neuralink. And then came the moment no one had anticipated. Elon Musk posted a message to X, uncharacteristically long. "I don't agree with how this was handled, but if mistakes were made, they should be examined. I'll cooperate." It wasn't an admission, but it certainly wasn't a threat. Later that evening, Jasmine stepped outside the Capitol. No cameras, just the wind and the distant hum of traffic. Lillian walked beside her. "You think this is done?" Jasmine shook her head. "No, but it started, and that's more than I could say a month ago." Lillian smiled. "You're not just part of the story. You are the story." Jasmine didn't respond. She just looked up at the dome above them, lit up in gold, then down the steps toward the city that never slept, but always watched. And perhaps now, finally began to listen. Because in the end, this wasn't just about tech or politics. It was about reminding people that the truth still matters, and that silence can only hold if we all agree to keep our mouths shut.